Welcome to Drop the Shades, the space where we dim the noise, quiet the chaos, and reclaim our inner balance.
Well, welcome back to another episode of Drop the Shades with me. And I have the great pleasure of introducing Lissy Alden. She specializes in organizational and mental consulting, and she's going to tell us all about that. I know very little about what she does, but from what I gather, she has a ton of followers and a number of large organizations who believe in her methodology and has had a proven track record. Welcome, Lissy.
Thank you for having me, Joseph. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure. So, Lissy, let's dive right in. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your background and how you ended up doing what you do.
Yeah, so I burned out in my first couple jobs. I was a high stress kid. I didn't look high stress. I was just hyperactive. So always doing a million activities. And I felt like if I just gave everything my 190%, it would work. And growing up, I always say that works in school because you can, channel everything into your schoolwork and,
Sure.
sports and all of that. And then in my first job, I was working nonstop. I worked at a bank in New York and just completely worked myself silly and decided I wanted to go to an environment that felt less stressful, less high pressure. And so I went to a education technology company that went from 40 to 1,000 people in 3 years. So we grew very fast. There was more pressure than at the bank.
That's
and
pretty
I was
incredible.
it was crazy. And I was working with C-suite executives at the NFL, American Express, the New York Times. So very high profile work. And I burned out again because I was traveling all over the globe. At one point, passport control stopped me and they said, we're going to have to pull you in the back. We've never seen anybody with this many stamps in 36 hours. I was checking on all my teams who were running corporate training. And I ended up having major stomach problems. They couldn't figure out what was wrong with me. I mean, they were testing
I
me
was
for,
going to ask you that. Yeah. How did the stress manifest itself?
physically. I mean, at first it was like easy. When you're younger, it's my sleep. Yeah, like sure, I
Yeah.
don't sleep that much. And my routines were impacted. I wasn't going to the gym as much. But I ended up having major stomach problems, losing weight, which for somebody who eats every 2.5 hours was very curious to my doctors. And I was like, you know what, this job just isn't fitting for me. Like, I don't think I can be here. But at this point, I was at a big company and now a small company that got big. And I thought, well, I kind of just want to help figure out what's going on within corporate America because all my friends were similar, not with the stomach problems, but with the stress and the working nonstop and feeling like no matter how hard they worked, it was never enough. So I ended up going to MIT. There was a professor in particular I wanted to study with there. But also the founder of the theory of corporate culture came out of MIT as well, which is how do you create the right environment and behaviors within an organization for people to feel good and like they can achieve their goals.
Sure.
And I studied burnout from a systemic level, which I thought was like the hardest problem I could possibly solve. I ended up going and running some transformations for a couple companies and using this model for organizational fitness, which is about building the right systems, training, and tools to grow well and fast. So in the medical
Sure.
field, that looks like tackling everything from capacity and utilization and staffing to
Right.
making sure that your leaders actually have the skills they need to lead. But what I learned was that even when organizations are well structured and employees are well supported, those employees were going home and using their phones 24/7. They
Right.
were they didn't necessarily know how to manage what I call mental fitness, which is optimizing their life to basically build the right mindset to achieve their goals personally. And so I ended up leaving the last company that I worked at to study the brain and brought in the professor from MIT who oversaw my org research to come on board. And so I have the kind of 360-degree model for organizational and mental fitness so that the modern day employee can feel great, not just at home, but at work and everywhere in between.
So so you focus on research-backed systems that kind of work on focus, on clarity at work, and mindset and behavioral changes. What would you say is a critical obstacle in the path of organizations in dealing with employees that are not optimized for, from a performance standpoint, maybe from a psychological, behavioral mindset standpoint?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest challenges is that when employees aren't quote unquote optimized, I always like to say it usually means they're not feeling so good at work, which means
Yeah.
they're having a harder time hitting their targets, achieving their goals, creating the kind of patient care within the healthcare environment that you'd want. Um, One of the bigger challenges is it's usually not one thing that contributes to them feeling that way.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of times it's really natural to say, okay, well, is staffing okay? Are they okay in their personal lives? But there's a complex system of things that need to happen at the organizational level for employees to feel supported. And on an individual basis, employees need to want to feel good. And so the most complicated part, I always say, is the decision, both on the part of the employer and the employee, to want to feel
Right.
good,
Right.
period, as a first step to make that decision.
Sure. And obviously that's multifactorial, right? Because, even if you optimize everything at work, they still have to go home. And of course, you have no control over what happens in the home setting, right? So, how do you go about now? I'm going to preface this because I'm sure you can relate to this. You deal a lot with the healthcare sphere, right? And in my experience with the corporate culture, and I've worked with some multinational companies, whenever there's a consulting company that comes in, everyone can kind of sighs and so, oh God, here's another consulting company. They're going to come and ask me all these silly questions and they're going to give me this brochure and everything's going to be, back to square one once 6 months after they leave. How do you define mental fitness in your paradigm?
Yeah. So I talk about mental fitness as the capacity or ability to hit your goals consistently and with vigor.
Okay.
The capacity and ability to hit your goals with consistency and vigor, meaning I basically help people build the right mindset so that they can do whatever it is they want to do. Now, some people hear that and they're like, okay, that makes sense for the corporate environment, but how do I practice mental fitness at home? At home, we have goals too, to be present with our loved ones. We might have a goal to show up to the gym. But having the right mindset matters because I always joke, but every single thing, even the decision to work on your body, starts in your mind.
True.
And so, yeah, helping people do that. Obviously, I can talk through the framework that we typically use, but that's how we define mental fitness. And it's built through intentional exercises that are very small, but mighty.
Name an example of a initial one or two steps that you might recommend to an organization that needs to optimize the work environment.
Yeah. And do you want to talk about work environment or mindset or both?
Let's start with the mindset. That's a topic of particular interest to me.
Yeah.
But we will go to the workplace as well.
Yeah. So as a first step, one of my favorite things to talk about is this idea of learning how to win the moment. So winning the moment is really about helping people understand that the easiest thing to do to start to feel better is to learn how to make the tiniest decision you can make to help move you towards their goal. And the key of winning the moment isn't just about the decision, it's about learning how to feel good about that decision. Now, a lot of people say, yeah, okay, that feels like really easy. It's not, because most people in corporate America, their idea of a goal is get my presentation done. It's not open up the PowerPoint to start. And then even after they do the big goal, they don't feel good about it. And so learning how to feel good about decisions and forward motion, about progress, not only works because it helps people learn how to, one, focus or set practical intention, but two, it helps boost the motivation or dopamine receptor so that you want to actually do the thing. One of the
Right.
biggest things missing from the workplace today is feeling good about
Yeah.
progress and process.
Right.
And so winning the moment is one of the most fun things for me to teach people how to do, because the second you learn how to do that, all of a sudden you unlock motivation, you unlock teamwork, you unlock progress, which is what everybody wants to feel, from leadership to frontline employees.
It's kind of reminiscent of Atomic Habits to me, where you don't start with these big giant goals that are bound to fail, right? And so you start with very small steps and you just kind of build on top of those steps, right? Um, and talking about sustainability of these habits, how do you go about delivering a message to an organization that, say, has, I don't know, 1,000, 2,000 employees, where you have people coming from all these different backgrounds? How do you deliver a message that kind of resonates with everyone?
It's a good question. I always like to say you can't necessarily know where someone's spending time in their mind. So
Sure.
trying to get everybody on the same page at the exact same
Yep.
time can be a challenge.
Yep.
But one of the best things that I usually try to come back to are company mission, vision, values, or what I call them the set of expectations, which is when you walk into an organization, assuming free will is involved for most employees today, you've opted into a set of goals, which is what you're there to do day to day. And then also a set of behaviors, which are the values that you engage with. And
Sure.
attaching this idea of, as an example, winning the moment to those values or that goal matters. And it's self-reinforcing, because the whole point of being in an organization is to achieve said goal, and to hit that goal consistently, you need to do X. So I'm always kind of coming back to this idea of organizational fitness, which is getting clear on where we're headed, what we're trying to achieve, as a way to drive the importance of mindset.
I'm sure in your experience, you've come upon situations where one of the mid-level managers is just kind of a toxic person, and you just feel like this person doesn't belong here. And so how do you go about navigating that kind of a situation?
Yeah, it's a great question. And this actually goes back to values, which can feel like a very soft conversation. But at the end of the day, every single person needs to be clear at an organization, not just what they're doing, but how they're expected to behave. And the how they're expected to behave piece matters, because most organizations have values listed on a wall, but people aren't necessarily held accountable to them. No company I've ever heard of said bad attitude is one of the things they value the most.
Right. Right.
Now, there's a lot of other things, like we want you to care about what we do. We want you to be a leader. We want you to be an owner, things like that. Whenever I come across somebody who seems to be blocking, a team, or exhibiting values that are not outside, or they're outside of what are stated by the company as desired values, it's really about privately hitting reset on those expectations with them. Hey, you're delivering maybe on the what, right? You're doing a great job here. But right now we've gotten this specific feedback that you're not delivering on our values of X, Y, and Z.
Sure.
And this is what, I need to see, what's getting in the way. If that doesn't happen or improve over time, this is when you escalate. And most organizations, I find, are very comfortable firing for violations of the what or the goal, but very uncomfortable hiring for violations of the how, which are the values. But your values at the end of the day are really what makes a feeling happen for you within the organization, and obviously for your end customer or patient. So you kind of have to treat it the same way you would somebody not hitting a performance target.
And of course, you have metrics that you follow, and in terms of your deliverables to the organization, right? So question for you: you've been doing this for about 15, 20 years?
15
Is that
years,
about right?
yeah.
Okay. So one of the things I've noticed, and I'll preface this by saying I feel very blessed. I do I'm doing, I love what I do. And I do a lot of pediatric anesthesia and of course, some broadcasting. And so I am very content. So when I show up to work, I am there because I want to be there. And one of the dynamics that I've seen, because I was in a situation where I used to have employees working for me, is on an organizational level, I've dealt with people who are there because they have to be there and not necessarily because that was their chosen career path or, they're just there for the paycheck. And how often do you come across that?
So this is a fun one to talk about. It's a great question because the notion that I have to be here for a paycheck is a mindset.
Of course.
And there's a lot of people like that who think that they need to be somewhere for a mindset. And this is what we call a fixed mindset, which is a belief that things are not changeable, that you are the way you are and things are the way they are and going to stay that way. Now, paying your bills, taking care of your kids, putting food on the table, that's all non-negotiable stuff. So I don't say this through the lens of course you don't need a job. Of course you do need a job. But do you need a job in the place that you're working right now? Absolutely not. The job of an employer is to find the right employees to fit their culture and set of behaviors to match their goals. But it's also the job of the employee to find themselves in a place where they feel like it's easy to do what they're there to do to make money. And so I see a whole lot, especially as I get hired by these organizations, especially healthcare organizations, people who've been there forever, who have I have to, I must, I wish I could go mentality. And a big part is either coaching the employee into another job, another employer, or having the employer help the employee on their way. And a lot of people might hear that and think, oh my God, what a cold thing to do. It's not. Helping people unlock feeling good, like I said, helps them do faster, better, and make more money in the long run. And so much of these feelings, I always say, feel subjective, but there is an objective nature to the conversation, which is you don't have to be anywhere. There are a lot of jobs and places where you could be. Are you choosing to be here? And does the company continue to choose you to be in that position? And if more people had that sense of agency, that sense of I'm here because, and by the way, because could be I'm too tired to look for something else. That's okay. But therefore I'm going to give it my all. Or we're going to keep this person, but make sure that they operate within the lens of, what we need to feel good every day. That matters. But a lot of this kind of I have to be here language removes a semblance of control and autonomy, which then creates like an ever more toxic work environment and relationship between employees and employers.
Yeah. I would suspect that you, in your line of work, you come across feelings of disenfranchisement a lot with employees who, as you just mentioned, they feel like things are not going to change. And so therefore they never jump the fence from this being a job to a career path. And I think that's what I have noticed. I don't know if it's a trend or not, is more and more people thinking of an opportunity as just a job and not as a career path where you are there to contribute along with the potential of growing with a company and going up the ranks.
Absolutely. And there's a lot of conversations now about this, Joseph, where the employee-employer contract has been broken because we don't have pensions in the same way that, we did 20, 30 years ago. So the employee would work. They knew they were going to be there for a long time. They were on best behavior as a result. And the employer expected a lot from employees because they were going to pay for them after they left. And now that that's broken, there is this question of, well, what's the point for employees to invest and employers to invest? And this is where you have to kind of realize that organizations are not people. So when you feel like your company is not feeling great, so often it's because there's a group of people who are in silos making decisions that may be impacting you in some way, shape, or form. That
Sure.
feedback loop of employees actually speaking up about what they need to do their job and feel good
Yep.
really matters. And then on
Sure.
the employees' point, employees showing up to work saying, well, it doesn't matter anyway, horrible attitude. That is fixed. Nothing will get changed. Nothing will be different. And this is where reestablishing your semblance of agency, which is the number one thing you can do to feel some semblance of resilience, which will help you weather the good and the bad, really matters. And so it takes the employer and the employee showing up to the table saying, we want this to be good for things to actually go well.
Sure. You earlier you hit on something that is a favorite subject of mine, which is dopamine and the dopamine loop and how it plays out in terms of our daily life, and how and this is something that I always tell my kids is, you know, busyness does not equal productivity. And so therefore, you know, everything around us has been specifically designed for us to get those micro doses of dopamine, even if it's nothing, you know. And I love that expression that you had said, that you get the same hit of dopamine whether or not you file your taxes or rearrange your drawer. I thought that was the greatest expression. Talk to me about how dopamine plays out in the intersection of organizational fitness and mental fitness.
It's such a good question that I have never been asked before. And it
I'm
looks
full
something
of
like
those.
this.
No, I'm just
I
kidding.
totally believe it. I'm canceling my afternoon. We'll be here for a while. So both organizations and people struggle with something similar, which is this idea that productivity is good and that more productivity is always better. And we have moved away, and I'm going to talk about organizations for a second. We have moved away at an organizational level from the word priority, which means one. What is the single most important thing, to priorities, which could mean 3, 5, 21, 42 things.
Sure.
Adding on to this complexity is that one of my favorite things to talk about in my research is that teams, they say, have moved from a noun to a verb. The woman who founded the theory of psychological safety, Amy Edmondson, talks about this, that teams are no longer static, bounded groups of individuals working on one goal. We are unbounded groups that are constantly moving, working on a lot of goals.
Right.
So all of a sudden, you're in an organization, there's global priorities, there's departmental priorities, there's, clinical, non-clinical priorities. All of a sudden, you have this entire to-do list, and it all feels good because adding things to a to-do list feels productive.
Right.
This
Feels
exact
good.
same things. It feels great. We're doing the most. We've got 29 priorities. We're ticking through them. The challenge is we do this in our personal lives too. I just wrote about productivity addiction. We get a hit of dopamine when we add something to our to-do list, but we overlook, from a neurological perspective, subtractive changes. So when we take things away, we tend to feel some element of pain. We don't count them in the same way, which is where removing something from your to-do list actually doesn't feel good, but adding something does.
Hence the hoarders.
By the way, hence the hoarders. We're all hoarding. We're hoarding our to-do lists, right? They're getting longer. We feel better. And all of a sudden you find yourself on a Sunday night, like buying another thing on Amazon you didn't need, purchasing another book, and then culling through your to-do list. And so at the organizational and at the human level, we are all addicted to this additive nature of our lives. And we are not recognizing that addition is easy math for our brain because of those loops you mentioned that you talk to your kids about. So all of a sudden, I ask you to focus or practice intentionality, do less. Oh my gosh, you want to see an upset boardroom? You want to see a whole bunch of people arguing? You want to see an individual going, you don't understand my life, but I'm a parent, Lissy. I'm a this, I'm a that. All of a sudden, people start fighting. So at the intersection of organizations and humans are this lack of ability to make choices or decisions, which is why winning the moment is really at the corner of everything I talk about. I have a whole research-backed model. We could talk through that. But teaching people how to make a decision in a moment and then feel good about a decision is the most important thing you can do as an employee, as a human, and as an victim of our beautifully bountiful distracted world.
Right, right. I often talk about how when you are on social sites and, the drag down button that constantly, reloads your site, and this never ending thing that has its basis in Vegas, with the
Yep.
slot machines. And they actually studied human behavior, and they discovered that, that every time you press that button or you pull the lever, which I don't think that exists anymore, you get a hit of dopamine. And there is, of course, a disconnection between, because oftentimes people are, have cards, credit cards put in. You don't have a separation from physical money to feel
Yep.
that. And so everything around us has been, designed that way, which kind of, I think, uh, tells me that decision fatigue is a part of this dopamine loop, right? Talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah. So great call out. The idea that so making decisions is cognitively expensive. It takes real resources. And
Yep.
one of my favorite things I ever learned about the brain is that your brain takes up 2% of your body weight, but between 20 and 35% of the energy you burn every day.
Yep.
It's really tiny, but really, really energy intensive. So when you're tired, exhausted, and overwhelmed, your brain tries to use shortcuts so that you don't have to rethink the basics, like I'm not supposed to eat this water bottle or get too close to the screen and scare you.
Right.
But what also tends to happen is we tend to avoid decisions, which is why adding that thing to our to-do list feels really good. Because we already know that adding things feels good. So we're basically just constantly trying to make sure that we're feeling good and that we're trying to maximize our limited resource of energy. So we're
Correct.
not making decisions and we're adding things to our list. And so there's this really, really interesting and important seesaw at play here where when you're fatigued, your brain doesn't want to make decisions and therefore we add. And decision fatigue is a very, very real thing. Now, a lot of people ask me, how do you solve it? It's all about making sure you manage your energy.
Right.
And so we can obviously talk a bit about that, but this is where the system kind of comes at play, this bigger model of making sure that you're not just taking care of your brain, but you're taking care of your body so it can feed your brain and vice versa.
Right. And you hit on such an important point. Our brain loves to automate things so that it doesn't have to think about it at the prefrontal cortex level. It likes to, automate as many things as you can and make it as much of a routine as possible. And case in point, I oftentimes find myself as I'm driving to work, I find myself at the local Starbucks, and without having consciously made the decision to go there.
Yeah.
And so, but it's true. The thought had not even occurred to me, but I have also been at the other end of the spectrum where I had so many decisions that were sitting on the front burner that needed to be made, some important and some unimportant, and I did not feel like addressing any of them. I was absolutely exhausted. What felt good was writing a to-do list.
Yep.
Because I made those little squares and wrote down exactly what needed to be done. I think I filled out an entire page and got my hit of dopamine without having achieved anything.
Yep. It's big.
So,
And by the way, that idea of like cognitive offloading, basically
yep.
allowing your brain to remove some of the things that's holding in your working memory is actually in itself a very useful task. But to your point, it felt like you were to done, but you actually had just to started, as I like to say.
Right. I did nothing. I just wrote down what needed to be done and then went away and started procrastinating again. And it was silly. And so it's definitely something that I've experienced on a personal level. Now, in your work, you've described a few different categories of people, and actually reading them, I thought I was reading about myself. Every single one of them, by the way. High functioning struggler, anxious overthinker, quiet optimizer, and a career changer. And I've had several reinventions of myself, and I've I used to be part of a hospital-based practice, and I went independent, and I've led other hospital groups. I helped other facilities in other states, and so I've done a whole lot of different things. So talk to me about the high-functioning struggler. What does that look like besides me?
No, by the way, again, you could have had us fooled, because the high functioning struggler typically looks like the duck, right? Super calm on the surface with their legs paddling furiously down below. Sometimes they dip out, meaning these are those moments when they just need to step away from work, step away from their bits, and you don't know where they go. But they're typically in one of these, like, I'll call it feast or famine moments. They're in a famine moment. They need to completely remove themselves from everything to recharge, whether that's through a vacation, taking a day off of work. But the idea that you're high functioning is that you tend to have some tinge of productivity addiction. You feel good when you knock things off your to-do list. You feel good when you're important. You feel good when you're doing good at your job. But then the challenge is you're struggling because you don't have the cognitive or physical energy to support the level of function that you're used to, or the standards that you're demanding from yourself, because you don't have those priorities lined up. So many of us operate like, if you walked into a factory, right? I'm in the process of buying a car. My dad also worked for Ford for years. If you went to a Ford factory, they know how many trucks they can create at any one time. Let's say it's 100 a day. Most of us operate like we just decide that we want to manufacture 300 today because we're feeling a lot of energy. So we send more emails, we commit to more things, we do more, but we're not aware of our capacity or what we're utilizing in terms of energy in our bodies. So we tend to go through to perform. So we tend to go through these waves where we're feeling great, and then we deplete ourselves really quickly because we sprint for too long. And so I always like to talk about the rhythm of your mind and your day that needs to be clear for you, which is going to look a little different than me, which is what we call stop, slow, and go. This is stop or recovery. Slow, which is cross training, these different things that help your brain function differently, and go, which is scoring. And if you spend too long scoring or in cross training, but you have no recovery, you better believe that you're going to burn out real fast.
Yeah. I get that. Now, anxious overthinker. Who in an organization, where do you find that kind of a person typically? Mid-level manager, CEO?
It's a great question. The scary part is that they're everywhere.
Okay.
So if we think about, I've heard this very, very rough non-clinical generalization that anxiety in many ways is about kind of this anticipation of uncertainty. It's people who spend a lot of time thinking about what could be happening in their world. I see this everywhere. I was just working with a nurse the other day who is one of these overthinking folks who definitely spirals towards anxiety, which makes it great at her job. She's constantly thinking about the patient, anticipating the unknown, right? But at work, that can be really challenging when you look at the non-clinical or clerical duties.
Right.
I was just working with the CEO the other day, overthinking. They tend to have a capacity towards doing that. Tired, exhausted, yes. And a lot of market dynamics shifting, specifically in healthcare, especially with the stroke of the pen risk, with a lot of the different policies and insurance providers changing. So there was a lot there. And so one of the more interesting pieces about whether you're talking about depression, anxiety, stress, burnout, pressure, any of the words you would use to describe yourself when you feel like things are getting to be a lot, is that we typically think about them as part of who we are, but they tend to be episodes. We go through episodes of anxiety or episodes of depression or episodes of stress. And I find that all of us have some element of anxious overthinker in us.
Of course.
The question is, where do those episodes show up for you, and what's your trigger?
Really good point. That's a really good point. I've always, in my line of work, and, every single patient that I've had, and I've had probably well over 20,000 patients over a 30-year career. I deal with anxiety on a daily basis because patients come to me at their most vulnerable moment in their life. They're about to surrender their agency, their control over their body and their mind to me, someone that they just met a few minutes prior to going to
Yeah.
sleep.
Yeah.
And so the way that I describe anxiety in ways similar to how you describe it is anxiety happens because our brain doesn't like uncertainty. It likes
true.
certainty in everything. And just like it wants to automate things, right? And so I tell them anxiety is just your brain's way of trying to be a time traveler and anticipating all of these catastrophic things that are going to happen, 98 to 99% of which will never happen. But it's a way of time travel. And it really can be very destructive, right?
Absolutely.
Now, by the way, most of what you've talked about has made me think of the times on Sunday evenings when I feel guilty watching TV and I feel like I should be doing something.
Yeah.
I bet you come across that a lot in your
All
field.
the time. Oh,
Yeah,
all the time.
it's awful, and I hate it. And of course, and at my stage in my career, I always have things to do, right? And obviously, besides the clinical activities, I have, the broadcasting, and I'm writing a book and all this stuff. I could always be doing something in addition to dealing with family. But the idea of just being still is such an incredible challenge of being in the moment. And I talk about that in my podcast. I'm like, it's really the only certainty in life is your next breath. And that's it.
Yeah.
Beyond that, you have no other certainties, no guarantees, which obviously those are things that our brain never wants to hear because it likes
Never.
certainty. So talk to me about the quiet optimizer.
Yeah. So in many ways, the quiet optimizer is the person who is constantly trying to make every part of their life better. And I call this the Miss America position, which is It looks good. Like every time they're home, they're taking care of their kids, they're cleaning up the couch, they're constantly trying to improve how they show up every day. And we confuse them sometimes for my core persona is at the core of all of these folks. They're better everydayers, people who try to just be a little better every day. Sure. The challenge is they're addicted to making things better in the same way many of us are addicted to the to-do list. So this idea that it's hard to sit on the couch on a Sunday after you've had a crazy weekend, no doubt, with your family, your big, beautiful family, and you've had a wild week at work, and you feel like you should be humming, things should be happening, you should be ticking things off the list.
Yeah.
This is that optimizer brain kicking in, which is, well, am I making anything better? Am I improving the world? Am I showing up for the people I love? Am I being my best right now? Now, many people struggle with this. In fact, I'd say this is like one of the biggest challenges of our society today, because silence, quiet, doing nothing, leisure is a muscle that you have to flex.
Right. Absolutely.
And most of us are like athletes who run on a treadmill on 10. For those who don't know what that means, that's really fast all day, every day. And then all of a sudden we hit stop on Sunday and we expect everything to calm down. One, we have to create space to decelerate. And two, we need to create space to feel uncomfortable in that lack of motion.
Right.
And the only way to do that is by creating space to do it and letting yourself feel uncomfortable and not grabbing for your phone and trying to catch up on text messages and not grabbing for your computer and trying to do more. And so most of us are actually double screening when we're in leisure time, which is just as bad as trying to be on a call and email at the same time. Your brain doesn't care that you're doing two leisure activities or two work activities. It's cognitively expensive to try to shift between two things. And so this optimizer is a little bit, again, in all of us, in that many people are constantly trying to use their time well. And that is an addiction in itself. And so this person, when I work with them, their biggest mind movement that they work on or decision to win the moment is actually to do nothing at all.
Sure.
And that's a practice.
Interesting. I was just thinking, I identify as an introvert. I live in my head most of the time. And, for me, the way that I describe myself to people is, well, in my position, I can't be an introvert at work. I have to interact with patients, surgeons, families, and the staff. So I become an actor when I go to work. But when I come home, I live in my head. And so I actually don't pick up the phone. I don't answer phone calls. If somebody calls, I usually give the phone to my wife. And so it's very interesting that as an introvert, I still experience those feelings of, I just should be doing something. You know what I mean? There should be something I should be doing to, improve something, or there's got to be something I need to do than just sit here and veg in front of Netflix or whatever. But let's go on to the career changer.
Yeah. So the career changer, this is really somebody who falls into that category. One of them is the person who falls into the category you mentioned earlier, which is, I'm just collecting a paycheck now, and I'd really like to find something else. Right? This isn't fitting me. As kids, we're told, if you want to stop playing soccer and go play basketball, all you have to do is sign up. But as adults, you are working as an accountant, and all of a sudden you want to go work as a project manager, and people are like, whoa,
yeah,
that's crazy, right? Very little credit given to the career changer, somebody who's really trying to do something brave and hard, which is try something new as a grown-up.
Sure.
There's a lot of fear and uncertainty in, can I do it? Will I be allowed to do it? Is it possible for me to figure this thing out?
And pay the bills at the same time.
Exactly. And pay the bills. Yeah. And there's a lot of feast or famine narrative. Feast being, you can follow your dreams. You can do whatever you want today, as long as you're willing to work hard enough for it. Or famine, which is, you can't have it all. Yeah. And these are mindsets that are owned by tired people. You can have a career that's fulfilling to you and make money, but you have to look at your timelines. You have to look at when it's happening and what specifically you're asking for. And so I find a lot of times my career changers are stuck in the either or mindset, the catastrophic thinking mindset. I'm either going to make all money, or I'm not going to find a job at all that pays me what I need, which tends to be a tired mindset. And that's something all of these folks have in common, is that their body might be rested, but their mind is not rested. And that's part of, again, what we help do with these daily mind movements.
It's interesting. You hit upon a really good point. In October of 2024, my contract at a very busy surgery center belonging to a multinational company here, the contract came up for renewal. And at the time, I was the big cheese. I was medical director. I was the head of anesthesia. I had 20 people working for me in various capacities. And I woke up one morning, and obviously there was a buildup to this. And at 5 a.m., I sent off an email that I'm stepping down as medical director. Wow. And then within a month, I decided not to renew the contract and walked away.
Wow.
And the culture at work had become toxic, and where I felt like I was not able to impact positive change. The surgeons were, some of the surgeons were wanting to kind of act independently outside of the guidelines that we had set up for patient safety. And I decided, this is not worth my time, and there's no amount of money that's going to, make me satisfied to stay here. And and I'm sure you'll get this. It was a very difficult decision to make, but it was also a very easy decision to make. It was easy because that decision had been made on a subconscious level a while back. but it was difficult to pull the trigger.
Yep.
And it was the best decision, one of the best decisions I've ever made. And it does require courage. But it speaks to when you come to a point where you are unable to impact positive change on an organizational level, and to continue, and you feel like everybody or most everyone who's working around you is not aligned with you.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I get the part about courage, because it's not, I don't know how many people would be able to make that decision. And that's not the first time I've made a decision like that. I have done that a couple of times in my life, where I came to a point where I decided this is not what I want to do. And, I come from very good training. I went to Harvard Med School. And so I know where my standards lie.
For sure. And by the way, congratulations on making those choices and setting the example. There's this really interesting theory called the progress principle from a woman, Teresa Amabile, out of Harvard. And she talks about this idea that the single most important thing we need to feel is progress at work. And what I hear from you is you weren't able to make literal progress on the what, going back to the org fitness conversation, but you also, the how was not possible for you because your values didn't align with the values of what was ended up happening, whether they were stated or not within the practice. And so this is a moment where you felt stuck and said, no more. A lot of people, you're right. They wouldn't listen to that. They'd say, well, I'm still able to do my job, even though I don't feel like the how is the right thing. Yeah. And so there's just a really important piece there.
It was a battle really between profits versus, versus safety. And so that was a non-negotiable for me. Now, going over those 4 different types of personalities, which of them would you say is the toughest one to work with to affect change?
What I would say is that these are in many ways psychographics as opposed to demographics, meaning they're like psychology of certain people. There are career changers who are too fearful to listen, meaning they're too much in their lower brain, their state of fight or flight to work with. But I could say the same thing, the same place that those career changers are living are the same place that those anxious overthinkers are living too, which is down here in their lower brain. And so I need to work with people, at the risk of sounding horribly trite, who are ready to win the moment, to make a decision, to do things differently, to look at themselves as part of the opportunity and the challenge that they're facing. And there is a lot of people who are looking for a retreat, who are looking for a supplement, who are looking for a new boss, AKA all things outside of themselves, who are going to fix their challenges or find them their opportunities. But I need people who understand that they may have to make some change. And I would say that those 2 are the buckets where sometimes people are too physiologically far away from where they need to be in order to take some steps to make a change.
Sure. And I would imagine, and this is something we haven't really touched on just because of time limitations, but I would imagine that you also incorporate physical fitness and diet and nutrition as a critical part of optimizing not only on an organizational level, but on an individual level. Because if what you are consuming doesn't benefit your body, then your brain is not going to be doing you a whole lot of good.
That is correct. We talk a lot about energy management as a first step in managing your mindset, and sleep, movement, fuel, breaks, tech use, 5 core ways that most people, as I like to say, need to commit to working on their mind. It actually starts in their body.
Yeah. Well, Lissy, as our time draws to a close, I would love for you to talk about how people listen to this podcast can find you and look up your stuff. I found this incredibly enlightening and informative.
Oh, thank you so much, Joseph, for having me. Anyone can find me on LinkedIn at Lissy Alden. You can find me and more of my work on our website at Mindy, which is MYNDY.co, no M at the end. We've got a great newsletter and a YouTube channel called Mindy Mental Fitness. And yeah, I work with organizations all the time doing consulting, speaking, and individuals one-on-one with coaching. So feel free to reach out if you're curious about any of these topics or interested in working together.
I'm definitely going to download the app because it looks very interesting. So,
Please
and
check
I
it
would
out.
definitely encourage everyone to look up your website. It is chock full of information, and I actually learned a lot just by going through it. So, and obviously, there's a lot that we didn't talk about. Would love to invite you back at some point. And you have a couple of very big life changes coming up for you. Congratulations on both.
Thank you.
And would love to have you back at some point. I'm sure we'll reconnect again. So
Absolutely. Thanks, Joseph.
thank you so much. Have a great day.